Hello, this is Scott Schertzen and Obie Spencer, and welcome to Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. This is the Sports Den. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the app stores of iOS and Android. When you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. Both apps are free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. And a pleasant good morning, afternoon, good evening, or whatever time of the day it is that you're watching this. I'm Scott, and that's Obie. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I woke up today. It was the first day of the new NBA season. I was very excited, and before the day even got halfway done, Ben Simmons was sent home and being suspended for a game. So, yeah, that's my day.
We got a lot to talk about basically there. You know, the hockey season's underway, which makes me very happy little pasty white ginger over here. I'm excited by that one. Feeling a little self-conscious also. I wore a T-shirt that I think it makes me feel a little weird. I probably should have worn a bigger shirt than but anywho, irrespective of that, we're going to be covering some stuff, a little bit of today in history, because there's a lot of baseball stuff that went down in our lifetimes on this day in history. I got a picture I'm going to throw in your way, too, when it comes to a what-if scenario. We talked about it a little bit last week, you know, when it came to a what-if scenario, you know, would the players have thrived in another league? I got that one, too. But I figured, you know what, let's start things off. Like you said, NBA is getting underway tonight. Give me some thoughts, sir.
I'm really excited because the East is incredibly wide open because the storylines are all about who's not playing where. And we have Kyrie not playing with the Nets because he doesn't want to get vaccinated. When we look at this purely from on the court, I mean, that really puts a lot of question marks out there. With Kyrie, it's a ridiculous 1-2-3 punch they got there. Without Kyrie, it's a great 1-2 punch, but one that may be answerable, especially by Milwaukee with Giannis and Drew Holiday, the returning champs. So that's one team they got to face. And who knows what happens with the Sixers. They were a playoff team, you know, within the last, you know, they were number one seed last year. 3 years ago, they missed the NBA Finals by a Kawhi Leonard shot. Now there's a cell phone in Simmons' pocket. They may not be there. And Trae Young last year was the hero of the playoffs. And so what does Atlanta have now? Could be like Denver 2 years ago with Murray, who was good, and then the regular season came around and not so much. Or Hero in Miami, who had a great playoff run, and then regular season came back around, not so much. But, you know, neither of those guys were Trae Young level prospect, you know, number 2 pick coming out of college. So the East is so exciting. I'm not even going to get to what's going on with the West and the LeBron James Lakers and everything they have going on there. So I'm excited about the season, ready to see how it unfolds, and get those top teams to the playoffs at 80 games from now and get the playoffs rolling.
Sure. You know, and in this case, obviously you talked about the Nets. You know, a lot of pressure on them with or without Kyrie. Even if he doesn't end up playing, there's a lot of pressure to repeat and exceed what happened last season. You know, I think 50 wins is definitely an achievable number for them, maybe even higher, maybe 55, who knows, possibly even 60. But far and away, they're considered, and this is weird for a lot of years, to actually see the Nets be a front runner for the NBA Finals, considering the fact that it's been 20 years since they were last in there. And when they were, people were shocked out of their mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think 50 wins with Durant and Harden is easily attainable. The problem will be for them, how many wins will Milwaukee have? How many wins will the Sixers and the Hawks have, especially once things settle down with Simmons, if they do settle down or if he gets moved. And then, you know, maybe something goes the other way. The Sixers might just end up being like, oh, back to the process. You can't leave that out. Like Simmons can't get rid of Simmons, but they can get good value for Embiid. So they're like, all right, we're suck up Simmons' contract and send Embiid somewhere. Let him go win a championship somewhere else. Who knows where that is, but there's a lot of places he can land that would change the entire face of the NBA yet again.
Sure. You know, and speaking of, and ironically enough, the other team in New York, the Knicks got back to the playoffs last year. I know I'm kind of in the minority on this, but I didn't exactly deem it a successful season given how easily they went out in the playoffs. Most everybody else is like, it's a successful season given the fact that basically they at least got back in. Now the pressure is going to be on them to not just get back into the playoffs, but at least advance a little bit further and win that first round in the playoffs. Right now there's a lot of question marks there as far as basically whether or not Kemba Walker, for example, can stay healthy. But I think in this case, they might even have a little bit more pressure given the dollar value on the Knicks versus the Nets to succeed even more so than the Nets would.
I don't think that's from a fan's perspective, that might be a legitimate request. But from looking at what's going on in the NBA perspective, it's hard to imagine them being a top 4 seed. If you're not a top 4 seed, why would you expect them to advance? I mean,
I didn't mean it like that, but I mean as far as going better than improving upon last year. No, I don't see the Knicks by any stretch getting to the finals or anything like that. What I'm talking about is the pressure on the Knicks to do better than last year might be greater because of what the franchise is to the NBA and to the city of New York.
So yeah, and I'm thinking that might be a fan perspective, but I don't see them doing better than I see them if they matched last year, being successful. They didn't bring in a player that's going to put them into the next layer from playoff team to someone who can compete for the playoffs or the finals. And I know you're not saying win it, but the teams that make it past the first round are the ones we're talking about possibly having a chance because they're not better than the Nets. They're probably and they're not better than Milwaukee. So okay, now they're not going to the finals. They're probably not better than the Sixers. They're probably not better than the Hawks, and they probably weren't better than Miami last year. So just getting the playoffs again, and maybe a better year for this year would be from the middle of the season on, they're going to the playoffs. And they're fighting to get somewhere between the 6 seed and the 3 seed. But winning that first round, unless the Sixers do not have it together without Simmons, I don't see that happening for them. And I don't see that being a goal that would necessarily be one that if they fail to achieve is a disaster. I think if they're a 7 or 8 seed, that's a bad step. But if they can get the 6 seed or the 5 seed or even the 4 seed and lose to a team that might be perceived as better but had some rough patches, that's okay for them. I think that's an improvement, and that gives them that sustainability that will allow the money that's in New York to attract the stars to New York so that they can build into that powerhouse franchise. If they go off the rails, that's no one's coming here, just like no one's been coming here for a while.
So basically what you're saying is it's not so much if they get into the playoffs, but know that they're going to land someplace. It's just a matter of where, not if. And then that you're saying that's actually more important than necessarily moving on past the first round this year.
I think so. I think it builds a foundation for that next offseason to attract or trade for somebody that's going to then put them in a position where we're talking about them competing for the finals.
Got it. All right. Now, in this case, going to the other side of the spectrum, teams like the Magic, the Thunder. I mean, the Thunder went 2-23, I think, at one point in a stretch last year. Do you see any improvement from guys like those?
I did not see much. I don't see much improvement for anyone who was really bad last year. I didn't see anyone make those kind of dynamic moves. I mean, I think the team that we're going to look for to make the biggest step forward will probably be the Pelicans. Mm-hmm. That's the team I'm looking at to now go into that same position that I was talking about the Knicks being in. They're not going to compete with the Nuggets, the Suns, the Lakers, but be there as a threat to be in the playoffs, establish that we're in the playoffs comfortably. Because you still also have Dallas and Utah. In the West, forget it. The East, it's kind of like if you can't beat out the Knicks, then did you make much of a move? The Knicks are that kind of dividing line this year. They're the dividing line team. So if you catch up to the Knicks, I guess you did a good job. But if you don't catch up to the Knicks, you weren't as good as the Knicks last year. So I don't see anyone making that move except maybe Miami. But, if Miami and the Knicks and the Atlanta just change positions and then wherever the Sixers fall without Simmons, everyone else, whoever those 2 other playoff teams are, I guess it's an improvement over last year. But Boston wouldn't be much of an improvement, but that's the sort of I don't see anyone having made that kind of move, picked up that kind of player, be it via the draft or anything else to be,
Mhm.
hey, I'm here.
All right. Now, on the other side of the fence, if you look at a team like the Lakers surprised a lot of people by getting bounced last year. But on the West side, I mean, when you're looking at LeBron, now Carmelo, and a lot of the other players that they've got over there, a lot of pundits are actually thinking that they could actually go back to the finals despite the exit that they had last year. That was the first time that LeBron actually had a first round exit. So it's a weird situation for him, sitting on the sidelines, sitting on the couch, and watching the playoffs without him. But in this case, do you think that they've recovered enough to get back to the finals or at least challenge for it?
I wish I knew what LeBron's body was really saying to LeBron. That's really it. Like LeBron came out yesterday or today and said, I don't want the time off. The time off doesn't help me. I feel worse when I rest and load manage. We know AD needs to load manage. His body has shown us that it needs to load manage.
Mm-hmm.
But when those two guys are healthy, that's as potent as anything in the NBA.
Sure.
And the reason they went out is that they weren't healthy. So I wish I knew where LeBron's body was. You've got a great scorer coming off the bench in Melo, who still shows that he can score. You got Westbrook there, who's still an able-bodied individual in the NBA. I think we talked about it on our last show, or maybe it's in one of our other podcasts we do together, about Howard's there now and what he does when he comes into the game. Energy and anger he brings in can change the face of any one game. And he's going to win the game for you one game a season. So I do think they're the team to beat, because no matter what LeBron says about not needing rest, like you said, that's the first offseason this guy has had since he was like 16, right? I mean, this guy, from the year he got to the playoffs, he never lost the first round of the playoffs, went to 2 or 3 Olympics, was winning golds there, constantly in the finals, year after year, 8 years in a row, I think it was. Take a year off. This is a guy whose body, he's probably right that his body is used to playing at that level, but he's probably wrong in that his body likes it. I think he's going to be shocked. I hope that he's shocked what that extra 2 months off does for him this offseason. I hope to see a LeBron who looks a year or two younger than he did last year and makes it a whole season and really makes that run at it. There's certainly something to be said for the Denver Nuggets, something to be said for Washington, Phoenix. The other teams that are there. Doncic is another year older. He's going to be better. So there's a lot to be said, but I would put my money on LA just because they got the guy who's probably the best player there, except for maybe Steph.
Well, additionally, when it looks at LeBron, like a guy like that, the mental embarrassment of being ousted. I mean, from a career standpoint, a lot of people, would not see it the same way he did. But as a competitor that he is, this is an embarrassing first for someone who's a veteran in the league for now almost 20 years. And that's the kind of thing that gives you a chip on your shoulder to change your play, to change your attitude, and change how you're actually running for the next season. So I would expect a rebound because of the fact that he's embarrassed with himself and the performance of the team. And that's going to change the dynamic this season.
I agree. I think he is I agree exactly with what you're saying. It's an embarrassment that's not real, because I think anyone looking at it saw what happened, saw the team didn't have a chance to gel after the injuries, fell down out of the top 4 spots, top 6 spots as it was last year because of the injuries. And I think the intelligentsia and fan base, it just wasn't their year. These things happen. LeBron James, on the other hand, whenever they talk about the GOAT conversations, one of the things he had over MJ was, hey, I ain't never gotten kicked out in the first round of the playoffs. Like, that never happened to me, MJ. That wasn't my thing, right? They didn't have to go find me a coach to get me through the playoffs. And I'm sure that's something that happens. He doesn't say, but that's something that the GOAT conversation about him talks about. And now that's one of those things. Well, that's not there anymore. Now you got booted in the first round. So I am positive that you are right about that. That somewhere in his psyche, how big in his psyche, I don't know, is that embarrassment factor that adds a chip on his shoulder to a guy who seems to like a chip on his shoulder. Right? Some athletes do like it. Some athletes don't. He's one of the ones who seems to like it there.
I think so. Now, I guess one more question I got for you in this case, when we're sticking to the West. Jay Kidd is back in the news again as the head coach now of the Mavericks. He's had a I think just a hair under 500 career record when it comes to coaching, but he's going to be expected to win with that team right out of the gate. Successful fourth season for J. Kidd and the Mavericks is what?
I think if you're the Mavericks, this is a team that has to grow into a top 4 seed, maybe 5, depending upon how close that 4 or 5 is. And if they're 5, I think they got to win. The Clippers are gone this year, right? So that's a team that's out that was competing in that upper echelon. So I think Dallas needs to get into the upper echelon. They need to make sure it's not the Jazz in that conversation. It needs to be Phoenix, Denver, LA, and Dallas, I think, is what Dallas needs. Because, look, you watched the Olympics. There was this pretend story that Luka Doncic was going to win the NBA, was going to win the Olympic gold medal all on his own. Right? He came across France that had, 3 legitimate NBA starters playing for him. And oops, 1 NBA starter can't beat 3. I don't care what you say. But now he's with 5 NBA starters again. So I think there's a lot of pressure. I think that's a tough job because I do think they need to be one of the teams that when we talk about who's going to win the West at the end of the year, we're like, Dallas is there. And I don't think that conversation is happening now. So I already think they're behind the 8 ball for what they need to do to be successful.
And additionally, ever since they won the finals in the last 10 years since, they've only made the playoffs 5 times. And in every single time they were ousted in the first round. So this is a city that's tired of that. Dallas, I think in general, across the board, is largely tired of losing. Obviously the Cowboys are up, are 5-1 right now, respect where it's due. But it's a city that's tired of that. They had that one win. They had the one win about 10 years back, but since then they have never gotten out of the first round of the playoffs. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Kidd now, especially taking over for Carlisle, to show that he is capable of getting them to the next level. And I think you're right on that. 4 seed, yes. 5 seed again if it's close. 5 seed winning a first round, especially. I don't think, personally, my take, I don't think even, a 1st seed, 2nd seed, 3rd, 4th is what matters here. I think getting over that hump and getting that first round is more important because last season they were first, they were first up, the division. So it's still a team that needs to prove that it belongs there. And that's on Jay Kidd to make sure that he's able to get that team to, like I said, a playoff win for a change.
So I would agree with you. I think, right, that's kind of what you were asking for the Knicks, where I didn't agree with you. I think I am agreeing for you with Dallas. I will give it a caveat. If there is a team that is obviously better, that has something go wrong midseason, loses a star player for a period of time that comes back, and Dallas ends up slipping up to 3 seed, and that team slips down to, like I said, make it the 6 seed, and they lose that. Let's say it's the Lakers. Let's say it's a healthy Denver with Joker and Murray. If that happens to them, then there's that sort of pass. But you're right. If they get the 5 seed, they still better beat that 4 seed. I'm on board with it. They need to prove that they are competing for the NBA championship with Doncic, or it's a new coach, or that team's getting shredded apart. Like that team it's there now. Sorry, you can be the Houston, what Houston used to be, getting there and losing it in the late rounds for a few years, but you need to at least get to where Houston was before you start. Yeah. And we haven't really mentioned what's happening with Golden State because we don't know, but there could be Golden State could be the best team in the NBA again all of a sudden if both guys are healthy, Steph and the other Splash brother.
I was going to say Klay Thompson as well.
Yeah,
they could win 50 themselves as far as Golden State goes. But again, the West has, I think in my take only, I think the West has a lot more ifs than the East does. The East, Nets, Bucks, okay, Kyrie maybe or not, but it's still going to be more or less Nets, Bucks, I think for the most part in the East. In the West, there's a lot more options. And the West has been that way for a lot of years now, where they've had a lot, it's been frankly a tougher conference. So there's the 1 through 5 seed over there could easily be flip-flopped any which way, depending on just a couple of criteria. The Nets are not going to probably fall any lower than 4th. I think we just know that. But if the Nets were in the West, they might even be 6th. You don't know.
Totally agree. There, major injuries aside, there are no ifs, ands, but the 2 best teams in the East are the Bucks and a two-man Nets team, right? It's the two-man Nets team.
For now, it's a two-man Nets team.
Right. It's still and not that there's
anything.
With apologies to the other three guys who are going to be starting, who were good last year. They all did their roles, and they did their roles well. So apologies to those gentlemen. But if just the two superstar net team is that good, because those two superstars are probably the two best players, are going to be the two best players on the court for most of the games they play. Mm-hmm. Most of the games they play, those two guys will be the two best players on the court.
And it's going to be interesting, like I said. I mean, I think your attitude is that and this I understand why. Right now, a lot of this stuff is setting the pace, setting the term, but not until after Christmas. That's when you're closing in on the end of the first half of the season. You're kicking into the second half there almost, and that's where the season really, really gets into crunch time.
Yeah. That's how. Like I said, Christmas Day is really the beginning of the NBA season. You get to sit down. You have the three premier games. If you're in a family that watches basketball, and if you're not, you're watching on your cell phone, whatever the case may be. But that's when you start to know. That's when the storylines are solidified. Storylines don't change much from there, just where they weave to. Like the storylines are set. Let's get to the playoff with these lines and see what the story of the playoffs are, which is, of course, its own true second season. That's hockey and basketball give us that.
Yes, and hockey, like I said, is now officially underway. Devils have game 2 tonight. I'll be missing part of that for Tales from the Film Set, as we're doing a deep dive into the world of Ghostbusters. From every iteration, including the one from Larry Storch and Forrest Tucker, all the way to Ghostbusters Afterlife, which will include Finn Wolfhard playing a role that basically Finn Wolfhard plays in every single thing he does. But irrespective of that, we're about 20 minutes in. Find us always on Facebook and also on Instagram at Spanglish Sports World, and also at Spanglish Sports World Sports Den, apologies, and SSW Sports Den on Twitter. So, a couple of things actually happened today in history. Way back, we've set the Wayback Machine to 1996. The Braves beat the Yankees by a record-tying 11 runs. First World Series game at Yankee Stadium in 15 years. The crowd was excited. The crowd was impassioned. Yankees got crushed. Interestingly enough, I do have the poster from that eventual World Series. But for me, it blows my mind to know that I was watching that game with my father 25 years ago today. And makes me feel kind of old.
Yeah, I don't blame you for feeling kind of old. Yeah. How long I was 20? All I truly remember about I remember two things about that Yankee World Series, the first victory in forever. Number one, that when Wade Boggs was up with the bases loaded, he was going to walk. Like, I knew, I was listening in the car. I was like, this man's going to walk. That's what's going to happen. He's going to walk in the run. This is Wade Boggs. This is what he's going to do. And the other thing I remember is, as a Met fan, I was in a bar, and I strategically wore a shirt that was pinstriped, but it's not pinstriped when it's horizontal, right? It's only pinstriped vertical. But enough Yankee fans thought it was a tribute to the Yankees that I was involved in many of the free drinks that were going around as they won the series. So
fair enough.
Those were my two memories from that time.
But if you recall, also in 96, there was a Met the Mets actually were pretty much at the bottom of the feed at that season. But a Met did set a record that year, if you remember.
No, strikeouts in the season?
No, Todd Hundley, home runs in a season by a catcher.
Ah, yes, I do recall how they set that record, just not when.
Yeah, he hit. I was listening to, I think, Bob Murphy, that day, and it was a shot down the left field line, opposite field for number 41, overtaking, I believe, Johnny Bench. So credit to the Mets there. They did at least get back, get that for him. On the other side with the Mets, though, today in baseball history in 1999, Kenny Rogers ball 4. And that, honestly, speaking as a quasi Yankee fan first, Mets fans kind of second, that was tough. That was so painful after what happened with Robin Ventura with the Grand Slam single, to know that the Braves went back to the World Series on a bases loaded walk, as anticlimactic as that was.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking.
But if you notice,
no other word for it, heartbreaking.
Yeah, and like it was. Meanwhile, I was going to say Bobby Bonilla and Ricky Henderson are playing poker inside, apparently. But if you notice the funny thing about this, one World Series, then basically 2099, 2005, 6, and 8. ALCS and NLCS is ended. Tonight, we're on game 3. And game 4, for Boston Astros, granted. But if you think about it, in 1996, the first game of the World Series happened now. And tonight, we're on game 3 and game 4 of the ALCS. So the whole thing is being pushed off so much more than it ever was. And it's dragging the season on. You and I talked about this a little bit last night, that baseball is dragging, and some of the things that we had talked about as possible ways to reinvent the game, get it more interesting, get it more exciting. I think for starters, one of the things that needs to be done is we can't have these series, the World Series, go all the way into borderline November.
Right. No, wasn't there a game 7 where Jeter hit a home run after midnight? It was the first November home run in the World Series or something like that. And now they're starting the games in November.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. There's a little, in fairness, that was September 11th. They pushed the entire season back a week and a half just so the country could kind of recover. That was an extenuating circumstance. But this time around, yes, if this series goes 6 games at a minimum, it is going into November. It could end as far as November 3rd this time around.
Yeah. Okay. So that extenuating circumstances versus basically that's the plan.
Yeah.
That is.
I sort of have the same problem when it comes to the NFL. Now, with the NFL being on a 17-game schedule, now the Super Bowl is now mid-February.
Yes.
And that, like I said, that's going a little bit too long also, because back in the day, it used to be just simply like January 21st or 25th will be a Super Bowl. And now we're looking at a potential Valentine's Day Super Bowl.
Well, one of the things that changed is they keep going back and forth between the week off and not having the week off. Mm-hmm. At least now they put the All-Star game that nobody wants to watch in that week off when they have the week off. So that's a minor improvement. Excuse me.
That's smart there. But yeah, it actually, the day before Valentine's Day is Super Bowl this year, and then the next year around is going to be the 12th. So you're looking at, like I said, it's dragging it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that might be the number one reason not to have gone to 17-game schedule. Or somehow maybe they could have gone 17 game and avoided the bye, but I don't think the players ever would have done that, and I don't blame them.
No, I think you need the bye, especially at 17.
Yeah. And you're already seeing the thing about the bye though is some teams it hits just at the right time. Probably the Dallas Cowboys just got a perfectly timed bye week, right? There seems to be some sort of sprain in Dak's calf. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we probably won't even notice as the season goes on. On the other hand, there's other teams that are not going to get that bye week until it's too late and they're already out of it. So,
or already have it too early in the season, like the Jets did.
Right. Well, the Jets, that's not a team that I'm worried about.
Yeah, I know. But the point is that you kind of want to have it like that week 9, week 10 sort of thing, break up the season kind of nicely there. Even 11 or 12, depending. But the problem is in this case is that you have teams that are having it so early and then have to just keep running straight through for the next 12 so odd weeks. And that takes a toll on the team. So the Jets could easily be a lot worse with now having gotten that break out of the way.
Yeah. There might become a time when they realize it's just take a week off and put the All-Star game in the middle of the season or something. I don't know. Drills weekend. I don't know what they want to call it, but.
Well, in football, nobody cares about the Pro Bowl anyway.
Right. I don't ever watch it. Ever.
We turned it into a skills competition by and large, and people still are like, whatever. Yes, granted, it was smarter to do it in the break between, the NFC, AFC championship and the Super Bowl. That was smart. I'll give it that. But again, nobody cares. The ratings are trash for it. And I don't know. I would almost say disband it entirely.
Yeah, and the ratings, somebody wants to keep the game, and I don't know who it is, right? Somebody's making money from that game, which is shocking. I guess the NFL's making money because people are willing to pay for it. I guess the networks are willing to pay for it because either they're being forced to keep it. I don't quite get it. That's one of those things where I'm not behind those closed doors, but I'd like to be because I know the players don't want it. They'll take the honor of it, whatever. But
a free trip to Hawaii too, I think too.
It's not. Is it a free trip to Hawaii now, or isn't it in the same place as the Super Bowl now?
You know what? I think you're right. Yeah. You know, it's funny. As soon as I was saying that, as the words were coming out of my mouth, I'm thinking this is not right, and I couldn't put the words back in my mouth at that point.
That's okay, but because not for nothing, the guys who make the Pro Bowl, can afford their own trip to Hawaii.
Yeah, they can.
Those two things go hand in hand. Like, I'm not talking about some special teamer who makes one season getting $250,000 and then suffers a concussion and never comes back. Not that guy. We're talking about the guy who makes the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, but I mean, from a rating standpoint, it does make sense to keep it. Looking at the numbers on this, it still hovers around 8 to sometimes 9 million, between 7 and 9 million, we'll say. So for a mid-afternoon Sunday, when all you really have is, in this case, basketball and hockey, you know what? It's probably gonna do well in the ratings just from that particular standpoint. But if you go back even 10 years, it was pulling in 13 million. In 2000, it pulled in 13. 10 years later, it's 12, 12 and a half, 13, 11.4. I mean, they were doing great ratings, and all of a sudden, just gone. But again, good.
No, I think it's also part of how it goes to the effect that's pushed further into year. By the time that game comes around, your wife is already sick of you watching football. Let me not be that sexist. Your significant other who doesn't watch football is sick of you watching football. There is work to be done around your house outside. And you're like, yeah, okay, I understand. I'll go do the yard work, or I'll go pick up. And even me, you, people who love sports have other things that we're interested in. And it's like, that game doesn't count.
No. And like I said, if you have a local team that's playing right now in a non-exhibition game, which the Pro Bowl really is, basically that's all it is. It's an exhibition game. If your home team, when it comes to, like I said, basketball or hockey, is playing, you're going to be focusing on that because it's a game that has more importance to you and your loyalties than an exhibition game with a bunch of athletes that did not make it into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not seeing the best guys. I wonder how much the ratings have gone down, specifically from the time that Drew Brees got injured in the game.
Mm. Well, there's a massive difference from 2014 to 15. In 2014, it was 11.4. In 2015, it was 8.8, and then it was 7.6 in 2017. So ever since, like I said, 2014 to 15, it went from 11.5 all the way down to never breaking 8.8.
I wonder if there was a specific change in 2015, or we just got sick of it instantaneously.
Is that when they started going to the skills competition?
I don't know. The skills competition has always gone on. They just may not have shown it. Like, you could find these quarterback skill competitions from like years ago. Sure. But I wonder if it's from the rookie game when Edmonds his name from who blew out his knee on the beach game, and
in this case it's 2014. Okay. In 2014, they went with that fan-friendly across-the-board one. So basically, that season, Team Jerry Rice beat Team Deion Sanders.
Okay.
And then the year after that, they continued that format. So it might have been idle curiosity, and then at that point, people are just like, yeah, this is lame.
Yeah, it's still the same.
Yeah, because Team Chris Carter lost to Team Michael Irvin. And it stopped being, like I said, AFC versus NFC, and it was just like draft.
Right.
Hockey, I think, has it right. Where you have this small one period. Everybody's in a quarterfinal, all four divisions, and then they just play one one period. That team moves on, and I like that format of it because it adds a little bit of a skill. It adds a little bit of a drama to an exhibition game that way.
And I thought hockey was 3-on-3 also.
Yes, also true. But in this case, like I said, it's not one game. You got 3.
Right.
So you instinctively root for like your division, even if it ends up being like a rival. As a Devils fan, you root for your division, the Metro Division, even if it's got Rangers and Islanders and Flyers and Penguins in there. It doesn't matter. It's your division anyway. And for one day, you're all friends.
I think that's. I think you have to do quirky things like that. Basketball has its thing where each team wins a quarter, and then the team that wins the quarter gets to decide where the money's donated and things like that. Like, make it quirky. It is exhibition. Remember, it's exhibition. Play it like it's exhibition. Don't make the linemen go. Play 7-on-7 flag football. Whatever. It doesn't need to be what it is. The problem is when you're not playing football, pretending to play football. That's when people get hurt and nobody's interested. And fake football isn't interesting to an extent because we do go to see the smash hits. And yes, every year they reduce the level of violence in some way or another to protect these guys, which, hey, if it's my workplace, I'm all for that.
Sure.
So, but I don't want to see it when it doesn't matter then, and they don't want to be hitting each other when it doesn't matter. And, these guys don't hate each other like they used to in all sports. So, hitting a guy as hard as you can over the middle in an exhibition football game, it's just not going to happen.
Sure. And listen, I understand it from that standpoint because, again, it's still an exhibition. The days of Pete Rose barreling over a catcher in an all-star game, that's long since passed. Now it's, even when you see an injury that happens and a player gets carded, for that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes, whatever it is, players on both sides are unified. Because it easily could be them or someone on their side. So for that small bit of time, they're all united. And a lot of times they're on one knee together, locking arms, which I think is an absolute class move. I know some people, the old school don't really like it. I think it's an absolute class move to show support for the guy who basically, blew out the ACL or whatever happened. Because again, it could easily be your guys instead.
Yeah, no, and it could be you. And there's a certain extent that with football over all the other sports, probably. It just feels like there's you don't acknowledge it while you're playing it, but you realize the truth is that every play is possibly your last play. And in football, that's your last paycheck. There's no guaranteed contract. There's nothing. Boom, you're done. See you later, Cam Akers. Good luck recovering. Never heard of you again. Right? Whoever it might be.
Go get your real estate license.
Yeah. Right.
And that's part of the problem too with these players getting bigger and stronger and faster. They're hitting with more ferocity. It doesn't even matter if it's a lineman. It doesn't matter if it's cornerback or anybody like that. These guys are hitting so much harder. So the NFL is doing what they can, obviously, to add padding, concussion protocols, and so on and so forth. But as players get bigger, I think that's only a stall. It's a Band-Aid, frankly.
Well, to that point, I was watching whoever I was watching this morning, talking sports. And they were talking about Derrick Henry and what kind of freak athlete he is. Why is there no one else like Derrick Henry? And the guy went, oh, no. There's plenty of guys like Derrick Henry playing football today. You call them linebackers and tweeners. Like Chase Young is the same guy as Derrick Henry, except he's not putting the ball in his hand. He's trying to rip the ball out of somebody's hands. So Derrick Henry is not alone on the field. He just happens to be the only one who's playing that position on the field. So if you think about the size of Chase of Derrick Henry and what he's doing, and then remember there's other guys running at full speed, tackling dudes who aren't as big as Derrick Henry, who are the size of Derrick Henry, constantly giving that stiff arm. It is a different animal altogether. Yeah.
And to add to a step further, they're obviously steroid testing and everything like that. They're doing some kind of supplements and everything, in that regard. But a lot of that is just pure, just straight muscle. No cheating, just hardcore. Rock level workouts on a regular basis. And to show that kind of physique and to show what these guys look like without having to do, like I said, massive supplements, steroid injections or whatever it happens to be. These are just big dudes, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're bigger. Yeah. Who's this? Is this Henry?
That's Derrick Henry. Yeah.
Derrick Henry had a workout video this summer. I think his feet are on a stability ball. His arms are on rubber bands, and he's doing push-ups. So stability ball, push-ups with a rubber band that's moving. The core strength to do push-ups, whatever, is hard enough as it is. And then to add that level of core strength, you're not going to tackle him unless you can do that too.
Yeah. But I mean, I got a picture here. I'm not even sure who who we got. But again, in this case here, these guys are both with the Titans as well. But I mean, this is Mr. Universe almost level with the way these guys are jacked.
No, that's DK Metcalf.
Is it Metcalf? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it even says it on there. But yeah, you look at guys like this. Yeah, I didn't realize it was actually and AJ Brown. It was actually I didn't realize it was actually in the URL itself. But you look at these guys. I mean, like I said, that's almost Mr. Universe type levels there. I mean,
that's a crazy picture of DK. I mean, DK Metcalf, who is a workout beast, and then AJ Brown looking just as jacked, almost 2 inches shorter.
You look at those abs. That's full 8-pack on one, and what is now? I think we gotta say it's 8 on both. I was almost gonna say 10, but that's still, like I said, that is just ripped.
And with all due respect to DK Metcalf, who is the one on the right side who's taller, AJ Brown doesn't have that same definition as abs, but they're just as strong. It's just that he has a little more body fat. That's all. And he probably needs it because he's 2 inches shorter and he's getting hit by the same guy. Mm-hmm. So he probably has to be like, I can't come down to 7% body fat. I got to stay at 12. Thank you very much. So my abs don't look like yours.
Sure.
But that's not a problem. He's faster. Makes up for it.
Yeah. Let's see here. Body fat percentage. Yeah, I was going to say, what is Metcalf?
Well, that number's not always public because that changes. But
here's the thing: it says 1.9%, but I think mathematically you can't do that.
I know, like the lowest
1.9, and they're hoping 1.6. I don't think that's physically possible. I think it probably would kill you.
I know that's so low that's concerning.
Yeah, no, it's. Yeah. I know when if you saw Zac, I think it was at Zac Efron when he did Baywatch, he was down to about 4% body fat in that, and that was tight as hell. But this is about that same level, and he was supposedly between 4 and 5%.
Yeah, that's what they used to say Herschel Walker was around 4%, who was another guy who just loved to work out.
And still does.
Yes, yeah. And the question is that useful for them?
No, but you know what? If he's impassioned to want to do it.
Yes. No, I'm talking about for the athletes. Like, so we saw how good let me use the word good, that DK and Brown look. Mm-hmm. Compared to the first picture we saw, which was Derrick Henry, who did not look as ripped as those guys, but he was definitely bigger than those guys. And so, being ripped is only so important. What's more important, of course, is having the muscle in the right place, the balance, that core strength, being able to still move fast, which all three of these guys who we showed are definitely fast guys. So nothing there. But Zeke always shows off his 6-pack now. And you can show some of the offensive linemen, the fat guys, but then you can show them lifting the weights that DK Metcalf only wishes he could lift because it's a different part of the game. It's these guys are stronger, and that's another thing. Like, what would Jim Brown look like if he had played in today's NFL? Like, if he had to play with the rest of the guys, we know how much work he did back then when you didn't have to have that same thing, that same physique. That's not what the game was about. You have to imagine his mentality would have been to keep up with these guys. What would he have looked like? So it's part of it is the competition that you're playing against every day. You have to be able to beat them, so you have to be able to do what they're doing.
Yeah, what would he have looked like? Well, in general, a lot of players across any of the sports. But if you also look how much more work is done on neck work, building the neck muscles themselves because of the amount of damage it does when basically your head gets hit backwards. They never really used to do neck workouts. Now it's a massive, massive part of it. Not just neck, but traps as well. This entire area here.
Yes.
Just to store and protect the head from being jerked back and getting whiplash.
Taking the weights this way, the ISO, absolutely. All of that.
If I was going to say, if you remember, when you were up here, there was a DJ on KTU in New York by the name of Goomba Johnny. Goomba Johnny, he actually was on the practice squad for the Giants and the Jets. And one of the things I remember talking to him about why he got out, he's like, players were hitting harder. He's like, there was no way I could physically be able to keep up with guys like that. And I'm just like, I'm protecting myself here. Let me go into radio and do, the morning show for like 15 years in New York. But he was outright with just like, yeah, I'm afraid for my own health and my own safety because I know I can't keep up with these guys. And they just keep getting bigger by the day.
Yeah, they are not, and it's not just them. I mean, we talk about, I think we've had this conversation before. First of all, everyone says, LeBron could have played tight end. You said you might have a what-if picture here. And we all know how big LeBron is. Mm-hmm. And then we go look at Shannon Sharpe, who played tight end, and you're like, well, LeBron may not be that big. So, yeah, everybody's getting bigger and understanding the value in lifting and lifting properly. There's a word for that when it's not just looking big. Like The Rock is super strong and super big, but he's not necessarily functionally strong because that's not what he needs to be. Mm-hmm. And these athletes are functionally strong. They're not just, those muscles aren't just there to look good, which like my muscles are, whatever little tiny muscles they are, right? I don't care how strong I am. I'm not lifting anybody off of me, but those guys have to lift people off them, push people off them, stiff arm somebody who's probably just as strong as they are. So yeah, it's a whole different thing. And now people understand the difference between functionally strong and just getting big like Arnold.
But with a guy like Arnold or The Rock now, I mean, so much of their money comes from that physique. The Rock, I think 2 years ago, made $89.1 million. He did not do that based on, his acting ability. He did it based on his persona and especially the ridiculously jacked muscles that he has.
So let me ask you, let's take a slight left turn to films from the stories from the set. So you said that previously to me somewhere, but if The Rock was only as big as, let's say, Vin Diesel, I mean, The Rock is much bigger than Vin Diesel. If he was only as big as Vin Diesel, do you think his money would suffer? I mean, he's extra big than what I think he needs to be.
He's gotten bigger over the years because if you look at him, like maybe say 20 years back when he did like Scorpion King, or Mummy Returns, where he sort of kind of got on the map a little bit more. He was in good shape, but he wasn't like he is now. But now that basically, I would use the phrase freak.
Yes.
He's freak muscle, and it makes him so unique in Hollywood because there's nobody else. You saw Arnold back in Conan; nobody was like that. And then you have The Rock, where frankly nobody's like that in a tougher era. I mean, right now, back in the 80s and even the 90s, you didn't have really ripped guys. Now everybody is. Right. You look at basically any MCU with the exception of like Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo. Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, not Endgame, for example. But you look at these,
right.
And they're just
even Chris Pratt.
Yes. Great example.
Right. No, you're 100% right. I mean, that's a huge thing is that in movies now, superheroes are way bigger than they ever. I mean, every single guy right now makes Chris Reeves look like a midget. Right. I mean, sorry, bad word. Apologies.
Yeah, James. I mean, look at James Bond. You got Sean Connery versus Daniel Craig.
Right.
Daniel Craig. He's got the Sean Connery. He's got man boobs.
Right.
In James Bond movies, he has man boobs. And it's just the dynamic of how things kind of just change over time.
Right.
I mean, even guys like Jason Statham, Sly Stallone. I mean, you didn't see it so much in Creed because he was still, he still had the shirt and everything. But you see him in, like, say, Rocky Balboa when he was still 60 years old then. He looked ripped then, 15 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Stallone had to compete with Arnold in terms of the physique, which you couldn't do because at that time in the world, nobody literally could compete with Arnold. If you take it to bodybuilding, Arnold even looks at these guys and goes, "I'm not that big. I was never that big. I could never look like that." And even in the world of bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger's whatever it was, 5 championships in a row, he would not be winning with that body. And so that Arnold Schwarzenegger then is what we're getting from Chris Hemsworth and Jason Momoa now.
Yeah, Momoa is a good example too, yeah.
The Rock is another step above them. And then if you go look at the guys who are doing bodybuilding, you're like, wow, The Rock is still a step behind that group. So, I mean, that's how much we've grown in that time frame.
I've thought about this a little bit. And while I don't think he'd be as popular, I think The Rock would still be an A-lister if he was like Scorpion King level where he was then, because he has the persona and the charisma to make him the kind of person you just want to chill with, not even talk about like, lifting or movies or anything like that. Just talk about whatever. You
Yes.
get some people sometimes that are just like, you forget who they are and you're just like, I just want to hang out with you. He is one of those, I just want to hang out with you. And I think that carries now more than it ever did. Like I said, you look at, action heroes of the 80s, where they're badass and they're tough and all this kind of stuff, no pain. Nowadays, I mean, they rip on them. His entire appeal is making fun of himself, and that's such a charm.
Absolutely. The whole Jumanji thing where he's playing a nerd in The Rock's body is just fantastic. Yeah. So, I agree with your second stance. I think he would still be the premier action hero if he was a size smaller, if he was more like John Cena or Drax. Drax isn't his real name. Apologies.
Dave Bautista.
Bautista, Vin Diesel. If he was their size, I still think he would be carrying the day. I think his persona is such that he would be. But adding his size certainly helps. And it's from a movie perspective, as like I said, we made that hard left turn. It is interesting to see who's going to be the next superstar big action hero. And right now, I guess Cena's leading the way, getting the show, getting his Peacemaker show. Mm-hmm. And not surprising, the guys who are doing well now are coming from wrestling because they're learning to act while they're getting big. And then they're going, you know what? Instead of letting somebody hit me with a chair, how about somebody hits me with a prop chair instead, and you pay me $20 million per movie? I'll take that. Sorry, Vince McMahon.
Yeah. But let me just close on this as basically we got one more picture being pulled up right now. Basically, a quick example of Iron Sheik back in the 80s versus, like, say, Brett Azar, who plays him now. We're gonna, like I said, we're going to wrap this up. All the images coming up. But any final thoughts while we got that?
Only thing I say is, Scott, thanks for having me. Everyone, you can find us, here every Tuesday. Look for Scott and I on the Stream Punk Sports on Twitch.
Live stream.
And you can find me on Drinking from the Garden Hose podcast, wherever you get podcasts, and that is craziness.
Yes, that's like I said, that's Iron Sheik back then versus Brett Azar now, portraying Iron Sheik back then.
He's portraying the Iron. Yes, great. Right. Yeah. And the Iron Sheik back then is in no way a small man, even by today's standards, right? No, he's not a small man by today's standards, but still, he's not hyper. He's the definition of hyper masculinity has obviously changed.
Yeah. I mean, Brett's a good guy too. I got to know him a little bit when he was doing like low end indie horror films. Like, the Jersey Devil thing, like these horror films where they're just like, yeah, this is not going to go anywhere. Pretty sure he doesn't put it on his resume now. He's like, he went from here, like me here, him here, to me here, him like way past the ceiling, way up there at this point. But yeah, just to show the broad difference between, like I said, fake Iron Sheik, real Iron Sheik. But yeah, I mean, so much is done as far as the workout routines, and these guys, it's an obsession because there's so much competition, especially now. So
you have to like it.
Oh yeah, even if you don't, your money comes from it. So
true.
But all right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks as always for tuning in. Again, this show you can find us always on Facebook and also on Instagram at Spanglish Sports World Sports Den, and also at SSW Sports Den on Twitter. On behalf of Mr. Obie Spencer, I'm Scott Churchson. Thank you as always to Eduardo, Janet, producer extraordinaire. This has been the Sports Den. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day and be awesome.